If you think accounts payable is just about paying bills, think again. Even that seemingly simple task is a lot more complicated than most professionals realize. What's more, the function has changed quite a bit, and missing just one key responsibility could cost your organization big time. Maybe you're considering taking a management position with responsibility for the accounts payable function, or if you've been away from accounts payable for a few years and just want a quick review. Anyway, in any event, we've got you covered. Here's a quick look at what the accounts payable function does in most organizations and how it operates. Responsibility number one, receiving and verifying invoices in a timely manner. Seems pretty straightforward, right? But it's not. Even the task of receiving invoices has now gotten a little bit more complex. Suppliers email their invoices, they send invoices through the mail, through the postal mail, and some of them fax them. And what's more, some of them do this more than once, and some of them will send copies to more than one person. So the simple task of receiving invoices has now gotten more cumbersome because there are more copies of the same invoice, and it is important that these duplicate copies be weeded out so they don't get paid twice, number one, and number two, so your staff does not waste a lot of time processing an invoice that is ultimately going to not get paid. How bad is this problem? About 25% of all invoices received today are duplicate copies. And they're not duplicates because people haven't paid yet. They're duplicates being sent for the first time. So huge task. The next issue I talked about is verifying invoices in a timely manner. You would think that the invoices would come in and they would be accurate, but that sadly is not the case. Oftentimes there is a discrepancy, and so the accounts payable staff, number one, has to get the invoice approved, so they send it out for approval to the person who ordered the goods, and then when that person approves it, they have to make sure that it's accurate. Now you might be wondering, well, why doesn't the person who approves the invoice also check and make sure it's accurate? And we could talk about why that doesn't happen, but at the end of the day, in most organizations, it doesn't happen. So it falls back on the accounts payable staff to verify that the invoice is accurate and also that it's not fraudulent, by the way. And you'll hear a lot of talk about the proverbial three-way match. And if you're interested in more details about the three-way match, we've got a whole series of videos on that topic. And I'll link to them in the description. Okay, responsibility number two, which I've kind of already alluded to, is paying bills correctly. Now, in the corporate world, we use the word invoice instead of bills, but that's what we're talking about. So we've already talked about verifying that the invoice is accurate, and also now that you don't make a duplicate payment. Now, many people at first glance, when they hear about duplicate payments, they think, nah, how much, it's not that big a deal. The vendors will return the money. Well, that's not entirely true. In fact, that's only true in a tiny percent of the case. Most vendors will issue a credit memo, and that brings up a whole nother set of problems about you have to identify them, you have to find them, how do you process them, all of this is extra work. And some of them do issue the credit memos, and then the credit memos just get lost, and your accounts payable staff never gets them, and they're not aware of them. And still others don't issue the credit memos, don't return the money, and hope that you never realize that you paid twice. So this creates additional work for the accounts payable staff because they have to, on a regular basis, look for these duplicate payments. And some of this has gotten exacerbated in the last few years because we now have all these duplicate copies of invoices, mostly thanks to email, because it's so cheap to send an email. It's not like putting an extra copy of the invoice in the post mail. Along with all of this that we've been talking about, these operational problems, many organizations are now trying to move their payments from paper checks, which there's another whole host of problems associated with those, to electronic payments and some P-card payments, but mainly ACH, and that takes a whole lot of extra effort. So what seems like a simple task is actually quite complicated. Now, I realize that I've just provided a high-level overview of these two very important functions, and we've got more information. Obviously, it's a lot more complicated, and and we did a 3.5 video on learning about accounts payable, and I'll put a link to that video in the description for those who want to watch it after this so they can get more detailed information. Okay, responsibility number 3, fraud protection. And when I say fraud protection, this includes both prevention, making sure you don't fall for a fraud, and detecting it so you don't fall for it, and then the follow-up afterwards to make sure that you haven't, and if you have, to try and recover that money. So all this takes time, effort, and a lot of it falls on the staff in accounts payable. Did you know, by the way, that accounts payable is often the first line of defense against payment fraud? They're also the primary target for many of these payment processes. If you're not watching closely, be aware that the fraudsters are, and so they will find ways to manipulate into your funds that you never thought of. If there is one tiny weakness in the process, sadly, they'll find it. And by the way, when we're talking about avoiding fraud, we're definitely talking about your money, but we're also talking about data, okay? Criminals realize that they can convert data into money, and so they're also looking to get your data. And so what falls on the shoulders of many accounts payable departments are becoming aware of new frauds as soon as they happen, alerting everybody to it, and making the necessary changes to existing procedures so that you have the necessary protections in place to prevent the fraud when it happens again. And it will. They'll try you again. There's probably nobody listening whose organization has not been targeted by fraudsters at least once, and most of us many times. Okay, responsibility number 4, regulatory compliance. This has become a huge issue. Ignoring regulatory issues can lead to massive fines and legal troubles, and a lot of these are related to your accounts payable function, and you need to make sure that you are compliant with all the latest rules. Addressing these increasing number of regulatory issues around the entire payment function can be a massive responsibility, and it's one that if you've never had responsibility for the accounts payable function or never worked in it, you may not even be aware of it. What am I talking about? Issuing 1099s, a huge issue in January, February, and when I say 1099s, I not only mean on the federal level now, many states have their own 1099 reporting requirements, making sure that the proper sales tax is accrued and paid if it has to be, doing the necessary unclaimed reporting and remitting, which I have to tell you, many companies don't do, and compliance with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which I call Don't Bribe Foreign Government Officials, and OFAC, which I refer to as Don't Pay a Terrorist, and certain industry-specific guidelines such as the Sunshine Act for the pharmaceutical industry and conflict minerals reporting requirements for those who are using conflict minerals. And as I've already alluded to, there's been an expansion of the 1099 reporting requirements because now many states have their own requirements. So massive change, and it is necessary that you keep up with it. The next responsibility I want to talk about is data analytics. Now, this is not something many associate with the accounts payable function, yet your accounts payable group has data that can be a gold mine of business intelligence. And in fact, smart companies are using this, and I know of several instances where the CFO, when he or she needs information, they go directly to accounts payable to get it. The companies that are using this data effectively are gaining a serious competitive edge. And so increasingly, especially as we automate some of the more routine functions, accounts payable is going to be about data analytics. So if you want to stay ahead, don't stop there. You want to watch our introduction to data analytics in accounting and accounts payable using the link that has appeared on your YouTube screen and is in the description. Good luck.